Yeah, so today we're going to talk about an MVP or minimum viable product that we've developed for Palladian systems that we're developing together. It's an MVP for firefighter training, and we're going to tell you all about it. First, it's more.
Can you speak up a little, friends?
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Yes. I like to walk around. So.
There we go.
It's like this. Let's see if the video plays. It does not. We'll just move to the next slide. So first, I'm actually going to call to the stage Fred.
Yes.
Surda, President and CEO of Palladian Systems.
Thank you. Good evening. I just spent 3 hours driving all around Boston, like twice, thanks to Apple Maps. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for coming out. Just I'll give you a little background on me. Or are we doing the background as we go through? All right. So my first career, graphic design, advertising, and marketing, 30 years. Along the way, a few highlights. I was hired to be the lead graphic designer, art director for the first US release of Grand Theft Auto, GTA, back in '98 at ASC Games. Worked on some other titles, Hardcore 4x4, One, Sanitarium, Jeff Gordon Racing, which was complete flop, disaster. Pepsi logos all over the place. I don't know if any of you remember that. We have another slide?
Yeah.
In 2001, I was hired as the creative director for Motorola's Integrated Solutions Division. Worked on all the advertising, marketing, and promotion for all the computer hardware and software for public safety, law enforcement, and homeland security following 9/11. I'm just reading slides here. So fast forward to 2016, I started looking to new mediums. How do I reinvent myself, my career? Started dabbling in 360 spherical videos. And I was very fortunate to make some great connections in automotive world, in the racing world. Worked with Al Unser Jr., Al Unser Sr., 4-time Indy 500 winner, Al Unser Jr., 2-time, Willie T. Ribbs, Robbie Unser. And so I don't know if we could play this. I have a lot of stitched footage from, we installed Views 360 cameras in the racing cars of these legendary drivers as they made their way around Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So unfortunately, Al Unser Sr. passed away last year, or about almost 2 years now. So this was never done before and will never be duplicated again as far as this footage. You can see Al Sr. there. It was really exciting. It was a lot of work, a lot of effort. But I was able to capture that, and the goal was to, how do we record this content and make it available for fans to stream to their phones, whether it be a Samsung S7 Edge or whatever, use a Google Cardboard. You know, we're playing around with all these types of things. And at the same time, I was dabbling in virtual reality. So you'll see here, one of my automotive clients, Armorall, we started tinkering around with that. We built this model in Lightwave, I believe. Does it play? And it was about 5 weeks. This is back to 2016. So we replaced the regular lens or camera in Lightwave with a 360 spherical lens. The idea was, okay, we have this predetermined path. We run that camera through, everything gets rendered, and then the playback. You know, it's a very passive experience, but at least you were able to move your head around. You know, you were able to slide your finger around if it was on YouTube or what have you. So that was proof of concept. It was pretty exciting for me at the time. And then fast forward, slide here. It was probably, I think it was December 20th, 2016. I had the idea, I was like, well, this is great. I could create these one-off pitch experiences for my advertising clients in the automotive world. I'm like, why don't we do something meaningful? You know, I'd been advertising and marketing for 30 years. And I thought, you know, it would be great to use virtual reality to make a positive impact, excuse me, on society. And how could we do that? And I was thinking, You know, firefighters go into burning buildings, you know, they practice maybe twice a year into a burn building. They light hay bales on fire and wooden pallets, and they get this thing all stoked up. And then they go in, and I watched it. And it takes hours to set up. You have predetermined drills, and then the breakdown and the cleanup of everything post-training exercise. It's a lot of work and effort. And I know they have to pull EPA permits, that type of thing. So I was like, why don't we use virtual reality to create, you know, these experiences where first responders, firefighters can go in and practice 24/7, 365. And that's how we got started. Reached out to the folks at Epic Games, Activision, EA, and then Epic Games kind of took us down a path. And we started developing with Phosphor Studios out of Chicago. They had, I think it was, I'm trying to remember the title for Sony PlayStation VR. I'm spacing a little bit. Brookhaven Experiment. Does anyone remember Brookhaven Experiment? So when I reached out to Epic Games, Unreal Engine Enterprise, they said, you need to talk to Phosphor Studios. So we did. I raised friends and family around. I invested my own, to my own detriment, invested my own savings, retirement. Yeah, I really, you want to talk about falling victim, drinking your own Kool-Aid, as they said. Okay, we blew through a lot, right? But we were able to get this developed in Unreal Engine at the time. And then I just took it around the country for like 2-3 years. And I took it to all these big shows, different training seminars, the centennial of the IAFF, International Association of Firefighters, and got feedback. I don't know if you have audio on this.
Go ahead, turn it on.
Okay.
You can talk over.
So, you know, the second wave of Kool-Aid that was served up for me on this journey was the constant validation, right? I never had one firefighter take the headset off and say, boy, this is horrible. I can't believe you wasted your entire retirement on this. They were, thank God, right? They all said, wow, that was wild. They have to remember, this is early 2017, right? The spring of 2017. And you had this, you know, Phosphor had done a beautiful job, Unreal Engine. You know, obviously it was tethered to a dedicated VR capable PC. We were using HTC Vive. The thing I found out also is that never put VR controllers in the hands of firefighters because they just mash everything. They use it like a sledgehammer. I can't tell you how many HTC Vive controllers we went through, dozens. They were just pushing harder and harder on the sensors, trying to get that door open, trying to rescue that victim. And so we learned, and thankfully, you know, as the hardware evolved and it became more affordable, we ended up working a little bit more with Epic Games, and they referred us to Phosphor Studios. I'm sorry, Preview Labs. Sorry. All right. We've only been working together for like 3 years, right?
Yes.
So we started the journey, and it was very different. Phosphor Studios, you know, they're a consumer video game development team. They did great work. It was really kind of like hand it off, explain it, hand it off, and they would do it. And it was like 2 or 3 iterations were done. But that was a single user experience. It was a predetermined path. You were being bombarded with audio, radio communications, and screams and sirens and all of that. It was really just to kind of get the concept across. Whereas with our friends over at Preview Labs are taxed with is, okay, we're going to build this, we're going to output it to Quest, right? Quest 2, wireless communications, right? And then we switched because there's a proprietary aspect of this system, which I won't get into the details of, other than for fire and smoke, we've developed, thankfully, the Hell Smoke system, which is physics and chemistry-based fire, smoke, and gas behavioral system, which is patent pending. So cross your fingers, say a few prayers for me. You know, filing for a patent, putting that whole process is very expensive and timely. But we figured, you know, let's give it our best shot. We've come this far, 6.5 years, let's go for it. So I've been working with Preview Labs for now about 3 years, and it was a very different experience. I had to slow down. You have Review labs, Bernard has I'll let you talk about the methodology and how you iterate and all. But here I am, this kind of crazy, excited graphic designer that I've been at this for, 4.5 years, sharing all the validation I've gotten. He's like, have a seat, let's start planning. I'm like, planning, let's plan, But I'm going to hand that off to the mic off to Bernard at this point. You'll see, again, the HTC Vive, we put it young, old, any gender, race, you name it. We had people in the headsets, and never once did anyone ever say that this was a bad idea, don't do it. It's usually, when can we get this and how much will it cost, right? And then lastly, we are looking at a consumer video game title release potentially. So that's about it for now. Our team, National Fire Hazmat experts, education experts. We have a new member of the team who's joined us here today. Mr. Mike Cates, Lieutenant, Boston Fire Department, Fire Hazmat Training Officer, 22 years. A godsend, really.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. So I'm first going to tell a little bit about my backstory, how I got into this kind of unique line of business. So after I graduated in 2006, I started working for a game company called Transposia. So that was a company in Belgium. I'm actually from Belgium. There we were taking games from different European territories usually, and then translating them to Dutch, usually games for kids. Then afterwards, I worked for 2 years at a company that was doing games for Nintendo Wii and Nintendo DS. Those were longer productions, not super long, but like 6 to 9 months. And I was programming at the time, and I felt like, wow, that's a long time to be programming on one thing. But what I did notice in the beginning, it's kind of really exciting. Like there's all these challenges that come along. Like there's creative challenges in terms of how is this game going to be put together in terms of features, what's the game design like, or how to interpret that. And then also technical challenges. There was like this one game where we did, where I had to implement like an infinite water surface on the Nintendo Wii, where you could kind of skip the waves and everything. It was a game called My Fat Practice Marine Patrol. So that was really fun to work on, and that was really in the beginning of the project. So in the beginning of a project, you really have to figure out all these challenges, and you really feel like you're making an impact, and you have to really think on multiple levels, like the creative side, the technical side, and then later you're more like implementing all the features, and at the end you're just fixing all the bugs that you wrote yourself probably, and then you're creating more bugs. I really found the beginning of the projects really exciting. And then in 2009, the first edition of the Global Game Jam came along. So that's where you make a game in 48 hours. So I was lucky enough to be part of that for the first time. And I got really excited about this. I was always somebody that likes to start really late on creating something. And then inevitably, I ended up kind of game jamming a little bit on by accident, but like going to a game jam like that, I could use these skills and also just have fun with other people, kind of creating a game out of nothing in 48 hours. It's like if you want to compare it with driving, like if you're starting from zero and you're accelerating and it's all pleasant, while if you're working on a long project and you're it's not moving as fast anymore. So that's what I really liked, and I said, okay, how can I make every day kind of more like a game jam, more exciting, like so it's not like the drag of the end of a project, and let's make it more exciting. And that's how I thought about starting this company, Preview Labs. So we focus on game prototyping, so that's all we do. In the beginning I said let's just do it for games, but I actually quickly learned that you can apply game technology in a lot of different areas. It's kind of the same skill, and that way we get to do more of it. So yeah, why not? So this shows a few projects. This is a project we did with the University of Michigan. It's about distracted driving. So you have to do a certain task normally, and then you do it with distractions. This is called Investigate. This is a game that teaches about teaches teen girls and all guys testing it, but teaches teen girls about yeah, HIV testing and also the importance to kind of maybe see certain red flags if you're in a relationship. So yeah, there's a lot of different things we've worked on. This one was about early reading skills. That's like the very first iteration of a prototype. Usually we keep it simple visually in the beginning in order to kind of feel it out what the gameplay is like and then elaborate from there. And that's the same thing what we did with the project, with the fire rescue project. So I started on my own in Belgium back in 2010, and then in 2016 I opened the US office. And then with the pandemic, yeah, we kind of all scattered around and just attracted people in different locations. So now we have 3 programmers in Belgium. We have a project manager in Cyprus. I'm in Connecticut. We have a team of 3 business developers in Argentina, and we're also looking to open a branch in Quebec to have a few programmers there working on games for the local games industry. So yeah, that brings us together, Fire Rescue VR or Palladian Systems now, and Preview Labs. So yeah, we met and got introduced through Epic, and then from there, yeah, we started talking about fire and smoke and the chemistry behind it and all the physics and such, and we kind of connected really quickly on this because it's like really exciting. We also had some previous experience with some physics-based projects. This is one which we did for a popular science museum, where we did the prototyping side, kind of figuring out paragliding. This is one where we used soft body physics in VR, kind of playing around with cornhole. So yeah, some of that physics experience that we had was also useful and came to mind. So as a brief overview from like a helicopter view of what we're developing. So we have, well, the main product is called Fire Rescue VR, which is for now training scenarios within the firefighting industry, so to speak. And of course, there's more plans, and Fred will highlight that later on. And then there's Hell Smoke, which is actually the fire and smoke system where we simulate fire and smoke. So that was a pretty challenging thing. So in order to start with a project, sometimes you can't just start prototyping. So that's kind of where Fred mentioned, like, hey, sit down, let's talk about this. What is the vision? Where do you want to go? Because prototyping, it's all about making decisions in terms of what do you want to focus on. So we want to apply a bit of budget here and there and very focused on certain areas. And sometimes you can't just start even because you need to figure something out. Sometimes you still have to come up with the idea and brainstorm. And sometimes you also have to do technical feasibility study. So when you need to brainstorm, it's basically when the gameplay or the user experience isn't clear yet. Then you can just start on your prototype. In that case, we start with a requirement session and a brainstorm session. But in this case, yeah, the technical feasibility wasn't so obvious. It's like, okay, let's set a building on fire in VR and simulate the fire and the smoke and how it spreads. And let's then do that on the mobile device like Oculus Quest. So that's not so obvious. So that's why we did a technical feasibility study. So what we ended up doing, just to highlight a little bit, like what we typically do in a feasibility study is like it's a matter of kind of looking at, okay, what are the different solutions to approach this technically? Or what are the algorithms? So solutions as in maybe there's pre-existing libraries that allow you to do this. Or maybe we have to go look at the literature and see what's there and which algorithms might be feasible to be implemented in real time, given the circumstances, in this case, a mobile device. And then we consider all the different criteria of these solutions and compare them. So in the case of the Hell Smoke system, we reviewed a whole number of different solutions. And you would think, yeah, it seems kind of basic, like to have a system that where you can have some fire and it spreads and everything. But it turned out there was really nothing there on the market that would work in real time. A lot of the solutions for fire and smoke would focus on the graphical side, like to create fancy fire effects and smoke effects and how beautiful the smoke can kind of fold over itself and twirl, and which is called vorticity, we learned. But basically, yeah, that was not really a system that would allow us to see how the fire actually spreads, because in this case, it's not about the fancy effects. It's more about, okay, where is the fire? What happens if I break a window, open the door, make a hole in the roof? So those are actually a lot of things we learned talking to firefighters, and like one of the things, if, and correct me if I'm wrong, like what they will do is actually make a hole in the roof so that
They'll correct you.
yeah, that the gases that aren't fully burned can actually be evacuated, because as you have combustion, like you have materials mainly consisting of carbon that burns and normally turns into CO2 if you have a complete combustion. But if there's not enough oxygen, it turns into CO, which still has can actually still react with oxygen given the right circumstances. And so if you have a house that's kind of locked and kind of closed and things are burning, it starts get oxygen starved. And basically you get a whole bunch of CO gas that can actually explode if there's enough, if it reaches a certain temperature. You open the window, what is it called, like backdraft or
Flashover,
backdraft, yeah,
different conditions.
Yeah, so one of the things they'll do, they'll make actually a hole in the ceiling and to evacuate that. So what we needed to do was really like a simulation where we see, okay, how does the carbon and the fuel, so to speak, in the environment convert into CO, CO2? How does the CO2, like the O2, the oxygen level change? How does that impact the fire? Then you open the door, then the oxygen can rush in. So that's, yeah. Basically, we ended up proposing a custom algorithm, because a lot of the algorithms that were out there would use like differential equations and stuff to really try to predict how the fire and smoke will evolve over time. While in a game engine, you're actually just, you work with updates, right? Like you have every frame or every tick you have, you can calculate the movements a little bit at a time, and you don't actually care about what it will look like in 10 seconds from now, because it's real time anyway. Like conditions can change at any time. So that's what was the approach with the technical feasibility study for that. So yeah, we went prototyping, and it's what we do is we do iterative prototyping. It's kind of the way to do prototyping, basically. So you start with the first iteration. Usually you want to aim for like a good first impression of the concept, and then by doing more iterations, you can incorporate additional ideas. You can see if there was something that didn't work, can be replaced by something else. Basically, that's how you experiment. And typically, we aim to define every iteration in advance. So it's like an experiment, like a scientific method, if you will, where you say, okay, we make a certain hypothesis. This first iteration features X, Y, and Z. Would that be good? Would that be useful? And then we build it, and then we look at it, and then we discuss it together. And then like this, we kind of take a step-by-step approach to it. This is from the first iteration of the project, where we started with an instructor view. The idea was like, yeah, well, let's make it multiplayer right away. You can go in with multiple people. This is probably in the second iteration. We started simple with fire extinguishers. I hope they don't show up with fire extinguishers if your house is on fire. Hopefully they brought a hose. But yeah, we tested with the team, like it was 5 of us in VR, and we could talk with each other and kind of really test the concept of what might an instructor need on one side on the laptop, and then other people, the students, they would go in VR. Meanwhile, we also did some other experiments, like some more visual experiments. For example, what would it need to look like? Like as we were doing the feasibility study of house smoke, we were at the same time also kind of experimenting with, okay, what would the visuals look like? Because the house smoke system, the simulation is really about where is the fire, where is the smoke, what's the temperature, what's the pressure, while then at the same time there's a visualization that had to be linked to that as well. So this actually shows the first version of the health smoke system. The first iteration, really simple. We had two colors. It could be orange, which is smoldering, and then red is burning. And then you could measure, you had like a dot near your hand, and it would show what the conditions were at that location. So what we ended up doing was kind of subdividing the space into cubes, and then for every cube we would calculate all the parameters, like the different gases, temperature, pressure. Yeah. And of course that's a lot of cubes, so it's like yeah, you'd be surprised. so there we made them pretty big. But the idea is really in general, like, where does the fire go? How does it travel? So that was the first iteration. I think this must be the second iteration of the hot smoke system. Here we could experiment with different cube sizes, like as a like for our prototypes, we have like actually a tuning system that we use for every prototype. The smoke was a little too much for my colleague. Anyway, so this is a later iteration, probably iteration 3 or something. So in this case, this shows how you could fly around from the instructor view. In this case, we already have the health smoke system integrated into the system. So as an instructor, you can fly around. You can say, I want to raise the temperature somewhere, and then just keep raising it until something catches on fire. You can also add water, so we keep track of the surfaces everywhere and if they're wet or not. So first the water needs to evaporate before it can burn, of course. So that all has an impact. And as the water evaporates, of course, it cools down the environment as well. In this case, we were playing around with moving. If you're moving around, the idea is like, yeah, you can just teleport as fast as you can and go super fast everywhere, because you might be heavily loaded as a firefighter. So we started really simple, like with a small progress bar that shows. And then in a later iteration, we said, okay, let's do this kind of out of body experience, so to speak, where you point on the floor and then you'll see the character move at the actual speed that they can move. Yeah. We also have crawling, as you can see. Yeah. And then, yeah, sometimes the question is when you're prototyping, yeah, when do you stop? So as a company, we said, okay, we go to the MVP point where we can bring our clients, their first client, which happened in this case. So Fred can tell us more about this.
You know, when you stop when you run out of money. That's what we found out pretty quickly. So then we go out and we raise more investment, right? So we have our own iterations on this side, you know. Well, we've compressed a fairly long and challenging journey in a relatively short period of time. So iteration 6, we have some slides. I haven't really seen this.
Yeah, this is this when you do an MVP, of course there's a few features you need, and of course you want to keep it as simple as possible. Thanks. No problem. Yeah,
the student view, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is what you see in VR. So we put some simple placeholder screens and to make it really quick to kind of be able to log in and we connect it with a database. Also, other things that were added is like different tools for the firefighters, so they can see the promise of certain things. Not everything was fully functional. You could kind of hold the things, but not everything is integrated yet. And then there's also a way for the instructor to decide which tasks the people that go in will have to do. So it's a whole scenario system. There's like, you see the push to talk walkie-talkie, so you have different channels, so you can kind of, it's really good to practice team communication. And then there's also a briefing and a debriefing, so you can see, okay, what did you do correctly, what was failed, so that it's useful for the instruction to really have a conversation about these topics. This is some more footage from the system where you can kind of set up you can go in and kind of make a fire and add fire or make things wet, and then save that as a base for a scenario. So you don't need to wait until the whole house is burning. You can start a fire, let the simulation run, save it, and then use that. Yeah, now I'm gonna pass the mic to
All right.
Fred.
Yeah, beyond firefighting. Okay, these are new slides. I haven't seen this. Thankfully we have fire hazmat experts such as Mike Callan and Mike Cates. Mike Callan has been training firefighters and hazmat technicians for 50 years. What you'll see here, because we were getting input from the industry, you know, out and about, we were doing our dog and pony shows. You know, initially, my initial focus was on fire rescue, right? You think, okay, there's people in a burning building, we got to go put water on the fire, we got to rescue people, ventilate, all that. But we started to hear from the industry that, geez, you know, it would be great if we can put, you know, a generic 4-gas meter in someone's hand. What's a 4-gas meter, right? So what you're going to see here is we already had all the chemistry, all the formulas, right, integrated into the health mode system. So what we needed to do was populate this virtual screen on this generic 4-gas meter to show, this is an older version, we had LEL in the upper left, right, lower explosive limit. So tracking gases such as natural gas or propane, right? Natural gas is lighter than air, so it'll go up to the ceiling or the highest levels, highest points, and propane will sink to the lowest levels. So we decided to kind of, I guess, pivot a little bit in terms of the subject matter, right? Focusing on more hazardous material type. And the industry has really been very responsive to that. Some other scenarios that we're working on, you know, thankfully, the health mode system, we did pretty bang up job with that because we have extra slots available for other gases where we can add like the chemistry for ammonia or chlorine, you know, metals like mercury, that type of thing. So we are still in relatively early stages of development, even though it's been, you know, 6.5 years and really 3 years working with preview labs, but we think we're onto something big. The industry has responded very well to it. And so we're gonna, what we decided to do, because this is where I put my graphic design, advertising and marketing hat, is like, okay, how do we monetize the different aspects? How do we compartmentalize from a marketing standpoint, right? We have fire rescue, we have fire hazmat, we have incident command. Now, thankfully, we landed a pretty big account. University of Missouri Fire Rescue Training Institute, they're a top fire school in the United States. They reached out to me because I guess I had a web presence and a social presence. And I said, hey, we have an RFP, request for a proposal. Would you be interested in answering on that with your own proposal? I go, absolutely. Put the team on it, and we were awarded the 3-year contract. So they're using our system right now for Fire Officer 1, Fire Officer 2 training at the Missouri Fire Rescue Training Institute. So from a technical startup standpoint, this is huge, right? Because now we've got traction. And we not only have, you know, a customer, but they're one of the top 5 fire schools in the country. So we're off to a great start. But I'm also trying to think, you know, how do we build this? You know, we have like Curricula VR, you'll see that brand. I get a little brand happy sometimes, right? Because it's the strength that I have in terms of brand design, logo design, things like that. But essentially the platform that we created to immerse humans in virtual reality, that could be used to serve up any experience for any industry. So now initial focus is fire, right? And hazmat, and radio communications for first responders, but essentially change the avatars, change the tasks and objectives. And you can say, okay, we're going to build a log cabin today, kids, right? And whatever the focus of that class is, right? So it's pretty exciting. Ongoing testing and evaluation. This is for you. Oh, this is me? Yeah. More of me? Oh, okay, gotcha. So again, you know, just a few photos. These are a couple years old now, but you know, I have to say the firefighters, I mean, you get all walks of life, all personality types. But there's one thing I found is that if they think it sucks, they're going to tell you, than its size, right? So I've always kind of had a preface any of my demos, like, we're in the early stages of development. Health smoke system is kind of working. We're going to work out the bugs as we go through it. There's a lot of physics and chemistry in there, you know, but they've been very responsive to it. And as you might all know, I mean, I know my generation. I mean, the first time going to my friend's basement in 1978, and his father he worked for IBM, and he had a PC in the basement, and we were playing, like, I don't know, Jumpman or Mountain King or something like that. They had Pong upstairs in the living room. And so I come from the early ages of video games, right? And arcade games and all that. So this is going to be a great medium. This virtual reality, augmented reality, as you know, it's not going away. It's just going to be this next, you know, frontier that we've managed to kind of poke our head into and find the resources to develop something that I think ultimately is going to save lives and reduce injury to first responders who put their lives on the line to save ours. So it makes total sense, right? And it's worth all the sacrifices, for sure. You know, we say one firefighter, they can go home to their family. It's worth it to do that, because it's going to have, you know, this kind of butterfly effect. You know, so I'm going to just move through a couple more. This was in Lafayette, Indiana. Again, they don't get very emotional, the firefighters, but they go through the process. They put it on. I have to say the learning curve was pretty easy for them. You know, I always preface. I always start off. Have any of you done virtual reality on a cruise ship, right? In an arcade, in a strip mall, a casino, right? And a lot of the firefighters would be like, well, yeah, there was that one time, you know, we were at the Maritime Aquarium or whatever it is, right? So for many of the firefighters, this was the first time they've ever done virtual reality. And again, you'll see here we have Quest 2 headsets. This is still a couple of years ago now. I think the Quest 2 has been out for about 3 years. Super excited about the Quest 3. That was the other thing. From a business standpoint, I'm trying to go with the best bang for the buck in terms of the highest value headset, right, for the price, right? Because we're really targeting higher educational institutions, colleges, universities, fire training academies, and whether the institution is going to flip for the hardware or that cost is going to get passed down to the student. And I think it's better to have them have to fork up $300. Well, thanks to Meta, right? They upped it like to 400. And I'm sure it's going to go up and down, and we'll have new versions of headsets. But I have to say that I've been very pleased with the performance of the Meta Quest 2 headset. So Q&A.
Yeah. I guess we'll alternate between the online audience and the audience in the room.
As soon as somebody types in the chat.
Oh yeah. Okay, no questions yet from the audience online. Any questions here in the room? Yes. Maybe the maybe feel free to come here, then I guess online audience can hear it as well. Yeah.
Or you can just repeat.
Or I could repeat. Yeah, the question was, what problem does this actually solve? And now we'll hear it from an actual firefighter.
Right. Yeah, well, yeah, Mike is new to the team, but I think he has a general idea.
Hey everyone, my name is Mike. So I've been a firefighter for almost 24 years now, coming up. Split my career half on the fire side, the other half on hazmat. If anyone here a firefighter background? Anyone related to a firefighter? Everyone always seems to know one, police type stuff. One of the issues everyone's probably been in here is with, say, human resources. They send you once a year, they send you a training packet that you have to review. Honestly, does anyone actually go through it, or you just play it, or you just check the box and you go through? As a training officer, I found that I need to engage everybody. So a lot of the stuff we do, if you think of it, when we get called to the scene, everyone wants a brain surgeon, a plumber, a jack of all trades, if you will, all in 30 seconds to solve a solution. We work on our heels. We figure out a solution and we make it work. So trying to recreate all these situations for first responders in general, whether it's police and fire, EMS, it's very challenging and very costly. So in these scenarios, can you sharpen your blade even more? Absolutely. Are you going to feel that heat? Not yet. But are you going to learn the decision making that you have that decision where you have a very quick margin of error, a very small. So if you're presented with a scene and it's a matter of a right turn or a left turn down the hallway, these are the things where we teach, where you can see these smoke patterns that are backed by science. So when you see smoke going in a certain direction for a trained firefighter, they know where the fire may be. If it's tracking towards a bedroom, that fire is chewing up all the air, and you'll see the smoke pattern moving in a certain direction. And it teaches firefighters that to recreate that scenario over and over and over again with regulations on how we do live fire training is very expensive. Not that it's not worth it, but do we really need to create that whole scene to learn that one minor detail that's really, really important? But keep in mind, for everyone in this room to go through this in that same point of education, it's a lot. And you don't want someone just to check the box like they do. Not that human resources information isn't important, but when it comes to these things where if you have a mechanic and they forget to put that one screw back into your oil pan and you drive off, that's a big one, right? So that one's something that you can do in the field, but to really hone that blade down and get your fine edge, that's where I really see this going. Recruitment, absolutely amazing response we've gotten from people with disabilities, never been in the scene like that. There's been every walk that we've had people that didn't want to get us back to the headsets. And that's where it was even more fun. It was like, all right, well, what else do you want to do? So we also learned where there was things where, say, someone who was newly promoted, that can happen in a day. You pass a test, you get promoted, you may get a crash course at the next level. So think of this with your profession. You've been doing your professional. What's the number of years you've been in your profession? What's some numbers? 20? 40? And anyone 10 and under? Right? So now you do your job so well, all of a sudden someone says, well, I'm going to make you a manager. Now I'm going to bump you up because you've been doing this for 10 years. You've been a fantastic plumber, but tomorrow we want to make you a manager and you have zero training. So all these little things give you a chance to practice on your own, where you don't have to be in front of your peers making mistakes. It gives you a chance to learn those lessons and make a mistake, and then have that muscle memory built in, saying like a kid's video game. One of the kids at the house plays a certain game and he plays it over and over and over and over again. And there's no, oh, I'm embarrassed, I've played this game. If I asked him, he'd probably tell you 1,000 times. Get him to clean his room, no chance. Get him to play this game, they'll repeat and repeat and repeat till they pass that level. And in this case like this, if you really want someone to sharpen their blade on an individual basis, we've had it where we've had people
halfway around the world.
We've had people at the same time in Thailand, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and there's one other place, all the same time doing the same scenarios that we're doing. So distance is no measure. And then you really can bring in people who are subject matter experts, or just they want to learn with certain people. They want to learn with someone that's been in the business for 40 years. And it gives you a chance to actually do these evolutions together. Takes a peace of mind off, right? So if you have someone that has anxiety, first week in our academy, you're scared of heights, we're going to know it. If you're scared of confined spaces, we're going to know it. Because you go as high as those ladders in the buildings go, and we put you in the tighter spaces. And then on top of that, you have the fire aspect. Whereas we go through the process, we build up and go from there. But in cases where you take all these little scenes that they've built and they make it, whether it's something small, it gives that junior officer a chance to actually go in and make a decision without someone having to be there over their shoulder. Not a fan of micromanaging, but sometimes you have to have that. You have that new guy in a situation like that, you can't really let them off the heels. What I mean by that is if you're on your hands and knees and you're crawling, and you have the new guy or girl behind you, and you say, you stay at my feet. Meaning when we're crawling, all's in front of you is you see my feet. So if I go left, you go left. If I go right, you go right. But there's some cases where you get split up. What do I do now? Well, these are those situations where you can be on your hands and knees, and you don't have to have someone exposed. Toxics, when you do live fire training, is a real deal. In the news, it's a very big subject in our international union. A close neighborhood friend of mine, who's our president of the international, is leading this drive on fighting against cancers. You go into any firehouse and you're going to see way too many pictures of people who recently died in the last couple of years. I can tell you, I'm at my 23rd year and change, My old firehouse, there was probably about 40 cards with a memorial picture of people I've actually worked with. Cancer is the #1 killer up there with heart attacks. And then these incidents that do happen. March 26th was this the anniversary of two good friends that passed away over on Beacon Street. They had a wind-driven fire that they didn't have much of a chance. Back in 2007, with the backdraft that they were talking about, it was an air conditioning unit that just came crashing through the ceiling that created that backdraft environment that didn't give two people a chance. So all these scenarios to go in and practice for these and read the signs and those little details that you might miss, it's a real thing. So just much as a active shooter training, police go down range, they go into a classroom and they have literally seconds to decide. This gives them that repetition when you get a chance to do this. So I'm all for this. I think it's a great way to really sharpen your blade. It may not give you the bulk sharpening when you get in there, because there's going to be some times where you do actually have to get the understanding. You're going to have to unscrew this cap to understand what it means. But once you get that concept and then you go back to the VR and then you do it again, well, like, now, all right, now this makes sense. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. Now I know what you're talking about. So now I go on there and do that. So you build that muscle memory. Repetition is a major asset to us, but it's also costly. So without driving up the cost of training, and then again, being able to be distance, whether it's in-house. Another great aspect is you don't have to take people out of service to do the training. Meaning, wherever you live right now, there's the firehouse within a short distance away from you. In order to do live fire training, they can't do it over here on Purchase Street where this firehouse is. They have to go over to Moon Island, which is on the side of Quincy. So wherever you are, whether it's New York or Chicago or back in Minnesota, there's an area they have to travel to. Now that area is a little bit short-handed, but then companies from another neighborhood, say in here with the North End, might start to cover over this area. And it's making sure we have coverage everywhere while the training is going on. This allows you to actually do it while you're in your own firehouse. If you want to hone up on something, you can put it on and run through it just to sharpen up your skills. And we're seeing in all different, we've gotten approached from, hazmat's a huge one. Hazmat, for me to create that toxic atmosphere, I have to put you in a hazardous environment. You don't have to do that with the VR when you're doing these science-based responses with these meters. If you actually use them the way you would, much like a smoke detector goes off. In order for me to do that, I need smoke. But in a case where you want to use a toxic gas or a flammable gas, there's a higher level of danger and you're exposed to the stuff. So with this, you're bringing in a huge safety factor. You're reducing the exposure that people are having and you're giving them a chance to actually practice in that environment. People have said to us, I really felt like I was in there. And they know it's a video game, but for their mind, their concept, they really dive into this. And all honesty, we're like, all right, the battery's gonna die here soon, and we're like doing the tug of war with them when somebody says. So, any other questions I can jump on by all means?
We have one from the chat. Curious to know what the development timeline looks like until this can be used in a real fire department in Massachusetts.
Well, I can tell you that the University of Missouri is currently using it now, and they're using it in their departments. So they're using it in different aspects. So as any industry, whether it's your own, you're teaching management skills. So we have officer development training that goes on right now with this program. For folks that are initiating that, it's a recruitment program that they want to put this headset on someone and say, hey, this is the kind of stuff that we do. And sometimes you get people like, I'm all set with that. And other ones are like, wait, one more. I didn't think you guys did hazardous materials. Since when do you handle mercury spills or fuel spills on the ocean or in your home if there's fuel oil spilled from a tank? All these things come into play. Carbon monoxide versus carbon dioxide. All this educational stuff you can really build into place. So currently right now it is being in use. And it's, if you wanted something special or something unique to your area, which we just got tasked with something, they asked me about something that I grew up in Boston. I don't know anything about the farmlands, absolutely nothing. And they put a task on us. They said, hey, this is what we do out here. All right, let's dig in. Let's jump in and we'll figure this out. So information that they give to us, we translate and help make it easier for folks that are doing development and say, all right, this is what they're talking about. Because I could tell you what a Hoosie Blessed is, and you're going, oh, I don't know what that is. So that's where we come into play.
I wanted to make an observation. I work with nurses in VR at Children's Hospital, and they also pick up VR very quickly. And that population, like firefighters, are used to acting in space, moving through, doing stuff under pressure.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And the case where EMS is a program that we're working on putting together for EMS protocols for the ambulance service. So in some regions, the fire department is all in one or they're separate, but it gives people a chance to really sharpen up their skills by looking at the signs and symptoms or seeing if they're presenting one way, but not to get tricked going another. We just recently, there was a anesthesiologist program that we just heard of that doctors are actually trained in doing the same process. So it's giving them a chance to sharpen up their skills, if you will. Sure.
What do you see in terms of imagining the balance between in-person training and VR training? You know, like, have you thought about that and thinking about?
Absolutely. Right now that we try at a minimum to get 2 live fire episodes a year for everyone. In some cases where you think the department here in Boston, where it's about 1,500, versus when you go down to New York City, their numbers are much greater. So in order to hit everyone, and again, if you think of it this way, you could have some scenario where everyone has a different job, and then you shift one step to the left. Now you redo that each time. You may not have the time or the capabilities when you're doing it in a live position. So, you know, in many cases, as a training officer at sea, people come down and they'd say, Fred is the best operator that we have on the fire truck. Let's make sure he does it because we don't want to look bad. I just got promoted. I'm kind of new at decision making, so we're going to bring in Bill. Bill is great at this, so let's bring in Bill. So we don't want to look bad in front of our peers. I don't find that people really learn when they kind of lay out their MVP team for each training episode. I'm going to go the opposite. Have you ever done this before? No. Congratulations, you're graduating in this spot today, because now we're going to teach you how to pop open this door and you get people nervous. We had a newly promoted female lieutenant down in Missouri, and the poor girl at first, her hands were rattling. And all right, what's going on? I don't know, I'm going to be with all my peers. I've never been in a position with all of these people. So we had a large group, probably 15, right? 15 at a time, but total in the classroom, probably 50, 60, I think, total over the day. Right. And she didn't want to look foolish in front of everyone. So it took a second and said, look, we're right here next to you. We're going to walk you through this. Matter of the controls, wasn't worried about the controls. It was that she didn't want to look foolish in front of her peers. This is her first time being exposed to this. So as they were going through, it was a matter of whether you want to have a checklist on the screen. And it's a reminder to say, hey, and I use a flip book right now when I'm in charge of something. And even just in my pocket, I pull it out just to go through to make sure I'm covering everything if I'm in charge of a large team. Hazardous material spill in Boston, right here in this water. There are multiple agencies, there are multiple factors to consider. There's a lot going on. So there's nothing wrong with going back to that. So on a screen like that, if you did have that checklist, it's a little peek up going, oh yeah, I got to do that. I got to do that. It gives that muscle memory a chance. So to come back to this is that I leave that live fire and I come back and I'm like, you know what? I did terrible. I'm my worst critic, right? I come back, I make dinner. I think I did terrible, right? And everyone's like, hey, great job. But you look at it like, oh no, I messed it up. I put too much pepper, right? But in a case like this, when you go back and it gives you a chance to jump back in and actually go over those bullets, the big points that you're like, hey, what did I miss? We come up with acronyms, analogies, all these little mnemonic sayings of things to remember. Sometimes that list gets a little bit long when you're dealing with like multiple agencies, like a fuel spill in Harvard, EPA, Coast Guard, police, public, water transit, airport, transport, going to the airports. So there's a lot to think about. When you're on the spot, you're the incident commander, you have everyone coming at you, everybody at once. It gives you a chance to run through that playbook over and over again. And not to mention, talking on the radio can be very stressful. You don't want to sound foolish. So before I key my mic, I'll take a second and say, all right, Mike, this is what you're going to say. And you run it through your head. We also have that incorporated into this program where it allows communication. So we had set up out in Missouri, people in different classrooms. They weren't even in the same room, so they couldn't hear each other in the classroom. So remotely, it felt like this female lieutenant was out in front of the building by herself, like it normally would be. You show up, everybody else is doing their thing. She's out in front. She's like, I feel like I should be doing something. And she's watching the clock. She goes, oh, At this time, I should definitely ask for this, or I should check in on this, or I have the companies that are coming in doing this. It started clicking in. She looked like a rock star. Afterwards, she was like, thank you very much. I really needed this. It was a great way to break the ice for someone to be in charge without having that big fire that costs a lot of money to orchestrate, or that scene if you're creating that. Everyone wants to play when it comes to this stuff. And we want them to play well and look well. So that's what we really wanted to do, was make you look good. Feel good at the end that you felt like you're actually bringing something home. Now, can we throw in little curveballs? Absolutely. And that's where this is where I really like this. So whether it is something that, you know, that'll never happen, it's going to happen, right? So as much as silly as this sounds, you could go to get out of the fire engine in your seatbelt. You forgot to take it off. You can ask any firefighter if they've been honest with you, at some point in their career that's happened. Well, their radio got caught on that little bolt, the native bolt, when you get out of the truck, their radio cord got caught on that, or something got tangled up, right? Those are the things we want to incorporate. So it does give you that, you know, fumble over the ball, but gives you a chance to correct your actions and then get back on track. So if it was just a matter of just walking straight in, everyone would be like, oh, this is great. But if you forget to take a step, well, you want to give you a chance to recreate it and do it well.
And check your batteries and your gas meter, right?
Absolutely, right? Absolutely.
You don't no sense going into a potentially dangerous situation with a device and batteries are dead, right?
Yep. Well, people that are regionally traveling, or if they have to cover large areas, if they're driving in volunteer firefighters, they're not checking the batteries that day. There's someone else in charge of that. So with these steps that we incorporate, they seem very elementary, but they're very important as well, where it's a matter of, if you have to check your key fob or your phone, you charge your phone every day, right? We do the same with our equipment. We make sure all the fuel's topped off for the saws, batteries are charged, fuel tank, water in the tank for the engines. Everything works that day. So if you happen to live near a firehouse, you're probably hearing saws run, equipment being started up. That's what they're doing every day.
We do need time for questions. Any more questions?
Sure, we think there's more hands popping up, so sure.
How unified the thing is? Are there levels or proficiency in experience?
Yeah, well, we have a variety of scenarios. I don't know, Bernard, can we get to the video? Do we have a video where it shows the instructor screen? Maybe not. But yeah, I mean, the whole, yeah, because I'm a layperson, right? So I'm just kind of like the director and producer on this project. But we were trying to break down the curriculum, right? So you'll have courses, you'll have, you know, modules, scenarios. Within the scenarios, you'll have all these different variables, you know, what tools are available for what use, that type of thing like this, right? Yeah, this is great, right? So I'm used to, it looks like this is the real instructor application on this device. Actually, by the way, I did bring our actual instructor application on a laptop, and I have 5 headsets with us. So if anyone would like to try it later on, please let me know. So it's kind of, you know, the whole iterative process, you know, with working with Bernard and the folks at Preview Labs, and then working with our content experts in fire and hazmat. It's kind of grown into this complex system, but the key for us is to keep it simple. Like I'm not a training officer, I'm not a firefighter, I'm not a professor. So I kind of use myself as a barometer. If I can, and I'm fairly technically savvy, but you know, keep it simple, stupid, right? Tabbed, windows, menus, drop downs, radio buttons, that type of thing. And I have to say, when we ran our training session in Missouri and they had full classrooms, I mean, they got in there, a little bit of a learning curve, but the instructors, they all ran in it, and they actually stayed 2 hours after class. We had the instructors never had students want to stay after class.
Or people from other classes.
Yeah, other people from other classes coming in, waiting at the door, and like, come in, you know. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we're going to be building out scenarios, modules, and making them more complex and more difficult and challenging based on your experience level in the future, for sure.
Yeah, I can add something to that in terms of gameplay or gamification. It's pretty much like a sandbox in a way, as in you can configure the situation, you can choose where you start a fire, so you can go in and kind of set things on fire or create certain circumstances, and then there's different objects that you can spawn in different locations. So it's really like kind of like a Lego box, so to speak. Like you can really configure and set it up, and then set up your own scenario. So that's how a lot of the interaction comes in. Also just from the instructor being able to talk to the different people and talking to each other. So there's a lot of emergent gameplay, if you will, if you could use that term. Yes.
Do you have to worry about, like, I'm sorry if I missed it, but the simulation of the fire, do you have any restrictions on like how large an area you can simulate?
Yes.
What does that look like?
Yeah, because for the simulation, what we do is we have a tuning system where we can play around with the settings and so basically we have a certain area like box shaped, and then we can just say, okay, and what is the size of the cells in which we subdivide this? And of course, there is definitely a limit. So if you want a more accurate simulation, you can focus on the smaller part. If you want to do the whole house, it's going to be larger cubes. So it's basically the amount of cubes that will define.
Have a large building, you can choose to use larger cubes, basically.
Yeah, and you can set it up wherever you want it to be. So you can say, okay, it's going to be fire on that floor. Then you don't have to simulate the whole apartment block, of course. Because yeah, and also one of the things that we did in the beginning, we made it so it could run on the Oculus Quest, and then we would synchronize the results of the simulation to other quests. But then we just decided, I mean, in the beginning, the idea was like, what if you could have a quest and kind of just practice by yourself? But then, because of the way the training evolved and how they saw the use of the application, they said no, there should always be an instructor. So there will be a laptop with an instructor, and then we can just, okay, let's take out a Razer high-end gaming laptop, and let's just use that. And of course, as we're prototyping in the beginning, we said, okay, let's keep it simple. So we implemented physics all on the CPU. So of course that limits it a little bit, but that allowed us to just say, okay, let's just move it from a Quest to a laptop, and because otherwise, if you say, okay, we're going to be writing shaders or to do that, you're changing the architecture of the system. It goes from a mobile Snapdragon architecture to Intel architecture, for example, or like NVIDIA GPU. Yeah. Yes.
I'm sure that throughout the life cycle of the project, you get a lot of feedback from students or firefighters, but I'm also sure that you get demand to add more modules or classes or missions.
Yeah.
With such a small team, how do you balance iterating and polishing what you have versus like moving on to the projects and the next thing?
I'm gonna repeat myself. Money. when the funding stops, when you run out, that puts the brakes on things, right? You know, because I can't expect Bernard and his team to keep developing, right? When the funding isn't there. So it's actually been good for us to kind of, and we're getting better at managing that process as we go through. But it's evolving. The process is evolving organically as we move through it. And we've come a long way just in three years, working with the team, working with the content experts. But as far as the firefighters, the fire students, the training officers, we're all consumers at the end of the day. And that is like the #1 response. Like, when can we do more scenarios? When can we get all the tools? We want to see a thermal imaging camera. When can we see, so it's kind of, there's this insatiable appetite for scenarios, tools, new environments. So we're trying to kind of like having to tamper that down a little bit and saying, okay, Bernard's been great at this. Like, we don't have to put everything, including the kitchen sink, into this iteration thread. Let's calm down. Let's cherry pick the most critical. And then we move forward, we iterate, we tweak, and make adjustments as we go. So that's kind of the way we've been kind of, I would love to say that we were joking about this the other day. It would have been great if I just showed up at Preview Labs with a plan, the whole document. It'd be like 5,000 pages long. Here you go, Bernard. But it hasn't happened that way. Just organic iterations. Any other questions or?
We have a question in the chat for you, Fred.
Yeah.
Do you have a VR use of force and/or de-escalation training program roadmap for law enforcement?
We, as far as law enforcement goes, we've got a world enough to deal with this. Yeah, we could go that route. There are other companies that are doing that. My feeling was let's focus on the first responders that I tend to think are underserved Right? Law enforcement tends to have a lot of the tools, a lot of the bells, the whistles, the budgets, right? So let's focus on those folks that going into burning buildings or going into hazardous environments, you know, give them a tool that they could utilize, you know, so we could go down that road. Maybe eventually we will. Like I said, that's why you'll see the branding here, curriculum VR. This platform could serve up any scenario for in any industry, really. Just a matter of changing the environment, changing the avatars, and then resetting. What are the overall objectives, tasks to accomplish the measurable outcomes that the instructor is looking for? Anybody else?
Understanding the needs of your customers and starting the development for each prototype, iterating on each prototype. So was it sort of a participatory kind of design where you started with collaborating with firefighters to build up these scenarios from the beginning?
Yes.
Or just you build up, you make sure the fire system and smoke system works, and then try to pitch it to fire department that here we have this MVP and we want to test it with training to see if it works or not.
No, we ended up doing the heavy lifting first. That's the one thing I have to say, and that's where I was getting impatient, but it's a necessary evil, right? You've got to put your thoughts down on paper. I wanted to do everything at every level of intensity, right? And it's like, you know, it cost us $5 million to do that, Fred, you know? So, you know, what I would say is being selective, working with content experts in specific areas, and starting with the basic building blocks, like do a 360, walk around the building, right? Did you arrive at the appropriate address? You know, rattling off basic communications, the benchmark. So I don't know if you want to touch on that, but, you know, yeah, starting with the very basics and then building upon that.
When Fred and I first met, we started talking, and he was like, "What can I do for you right now? What can I put together?" And I literally showed up with one of those tall mechanic toolboxes and said, "I want one of everything in this." And he was like, "Wait a second, hold on." So we tried to reorganize. Said, "Well, what's your highest priority?" Well, we started listing some things out, and then we took into consideration geographically where you would be. So things here in Boston would be much different from Missouri or California. Wind-driven fires in California with the Santa Ana winds is a whole different ballgame than over here in the small area of Boston, right? So we approached these things and we started talking about it, and we reached out to some other folks. And I do a lot of traveling and teaching, taking a lot of classes. And we reach out to folks in this region with saying, "Hey, give me a top 3." And they come back and they're like, "Oh, you know what would be great?" And they rattle something off and they come back, and then we try to take those and put them together so we can do an overlay in the scenarios and use them the same common denominator in the same similar screens. So we take that approach, and for me as one of the training officers, I want to have this pull down list of items that I want you to lead with. I want you to be able to know what they are, how to understand them, when to use them correctly. Because in these scenarios, to your question about having that whole house of fire, that happens. And for someone, again, when you think of someone seasoned, a deputy that's been around for 28 years, standing in front of this year after year and seeing these things, they still need to sharpen their skills. While they might start to tend to not use something as much as they did, or something new is introduced. That's a huge challenge in the fire service. Cell phones came up, right? People are like, "I'm not using those." Now they can't put them down. That's the technology wave, because you still do the same basic concepts for this, but there's a lot of new technology out there that's unbelievable, especially in the hazmat world. So regarding the hazmat, this is what hit it off. And Fred's like, "Wait, what? What do you do with this?" We're all these scenarios, whether it's train derailments, which you see on the news, fuel spills, drug labs, you name it. I specialize in the labs in the city, so I have a gauntlet of things for the labs. And like, wait, my storyboards are out of control now. So we go through and we come back and we say, well, what's the demand for this, or who's looking for this? And then we come back in recent events that pop up and we're like, hey, which meters will test for this product? So as stuff comes up in the news, there's things that have changed. From fentanyl is a big one. The products that we use for testing that will give people the background that don't have the funds rather to pay for those big ticket items. It gives them the chance to actually play with those tools.
Just a couple more, and it's almost 8:30. I want to leave some time for socializing.
Sure.
I would love to just get a photo. I think many of us would love to share this with other people. Can we get like a photo shoot where the three of you are right next to this?
Oh, sure,
Sure,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Share or tweet or.
Yeah,
Sure. And going while the time we can,
We can keep answering
sure,
questions.
you can answer questions.
Yeah, yeah.
How about,
While we do that,
Yeah.
And no, there are no silly questions, you know,
Go
so
where
feel
the
free.
camera can
Oh,
see
okay.
it.
silly questions
No
are
silly
also
questions. There's two things I do want to add.
Just so you're not in a.
Okay, oh, we're doing the picture.
Ready?
You're,
Let's go one.
yeah.
Okay, great. One more. So we can tweet it out or whatever, put it on. our-
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there's just 2 points I want to make. This will never replace physical firefighter training, right? And the other thing is that no one will ever die or get injured in virtual reality. We have a kind of like made a pact, right? We don't want to reinforce negative behavior. So I don't know if you want to just touch on the role of the safety officer, which I didn't even know there was a real person, a real role of safety officer on the fire ground.
any live training we do for fire, whether you're elevated heights, tech rescue, whatever the scenario is, we always have someone dedicated as a safety officer. So again, to fill all these roles at one live fire, you're talking about at least 12 people for instructors, even for a small group, say 4 people practicing. Still need by standards and laws, by the oversight that we have for these training evolutions, that we have to have these in place. Whether it's a fixed structure that we do over and over again in our own training facility, or if you're regional area, they may acquire a building that's going to be torn down, they may practice in there. So in those conditions, there's safety role factors that people have to be in place. There's people that make sure that there's a water supply, there's the equipment's working, there's people that have that safety factor because they don't want to have any emergencies that arise. Do they happen? Absolutely. During evolutions, people can have medical incidents where, say, for instance, someone's starting to feel the stress of the gear, the heat, the physical aptitude that goes through. You could have a heart issue, and then that arises, blood pressures, things of that nature, whether you're exposed to these things. So that's where we have this oversight. You have people in the EMS role that when you come out to make sure that you're okay, whether or not, hey, we're going to take you to the hospital and check your vitals. And again, all these layers can roll into this. So it's almost not ending with options that you can build from. This is where you want to focus your direction.
Yeah, I think that the way I see this, the iteration that we're at right now is kind of like putting that first footprint on the moon. This is the very earliest, of this type of thing. 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, this is going to be old hat. Like, how could you ever have been trained and not use virtual reality, right? The fidelity, the visceral experience, as you know, with Unity and Unreal Engine, it's just going to escalate. The hardware is going to be able to keep up with the software. Yeah.
You mentioned a visceral experience. How do you simulate failure and danger in this app?
This is where the safety officer comes in. Yeah, do you want to touch on that? We want to make sure we put the brakes on to not reinforce the negative behavior.
Right. Well, like if there's like dangerous situations, like fire, do you have a health bar? Is there like a smoke inhalation? Like, do you
we have plans? Yeah, we have a plan for a safety officer. It'll be either a stop sign, a hand. There's going to be some sort. I don't want to do anything hokey, so we're going to have to get clever and creative how to do that. But we want to kind of stop that freeze frame, the moment just before you do something.
Yeah.
Just before you do something.
Training timeouts.
Yeah.
So right now, this isn't implemented yet, but
Right.
Like the way I can imagine it would work is that the instructor can kind of supervise everything and can just tell them like, hey, don't do this. This is dangerous. So that it is actually it's quite flexible that way. Like you can just step in and say like, hey.
It's a teaching moment.
It's like
There's no automated system that kind of lets you know, hey, it's too hot, you're on fire.
No, that is currently not there, but we do know,
Yeah.
of course, the temperature everywhere, and then of course you have different, like your protection and everything, and I guess there's a certain amount of time that you can last in certain circumstances, but that's currently not simulated. But
How many people does your safety officer have to monitor per simulation?
Just in the normal field that we normally do,
Right.
one supervisor is the ideal number is from 4 to 7 is the range one person should supervise. So in the case of an incident command structure, which is one of the components that we teach with this program, it's a national instituted program. So anywhere you go in the country, if you go to a fire scene and you ask for the incident commander, the operations officer, or the team leader, they're not only identified, but they may be wearing a vest with that signature. So whether it's Katrina or a single family house fire, that system is implemented. And that's one of the programs that we push for training. So if it's a matter of, we do these scenarios where the travel distance is taken into account. So if you're in Minnesota and the drive time from where the chief's quarters is to the location here is say 15 minutes. But there's companies that are on scene and they can hear the radio transmissions. So we have these rules that are already implemented. That it's a 2-in, 2-out rule. You're not allowed to go in unless you have the right manpower. It's a safety factor. So in the news, you may see this, and I feel bad for my brothers and sisters that get criticized by this, but they'll see them outside rolling hose around and people are like, what are you doing? Put the fire out. Get in there. They can't. There's these training key points that are driven that if you don't have the right manpower, you can't go in. So all these little key points are driven into this. So as you're going along, whether we have a system, whether it's the instructor who's giving the class, we have a system set up to keep tabs on the key points that we want driven in each program. So at the end, we do a peer review, and then we give people a chance to come back and say, hey, I goofed this up. I'm like, we know, but we're giving you a chance to come up. Did you make a mistake? We did. Great. How would you do that better? I definitely would have done that. Awesome. So,
okay, thank you guys.